We're going to talk a little bit about mental health and suicide today. And so if you need to leave the room for any reason, feel free to do so. Before I give any talk, I usually like to tell everybody about 988. If you or anybody you know is experiencing mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 anywhere in the United States, and it's free and confidential. So really amazing resource that's out there. Demand for 988 and other crisis hotlines across the country has really skyrocketed. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline has been around since 2005, but 988 was just created in 2022 in order to make mental health resources more available to people across the United States. And so this number, one person reaches out every 6 seconds is actually low. It's more like 1.4 something. And there were about 616,000 contacts in just August alone. So increase is going up. Demand for these resources is growing, and these centers all across the country who power this and other mental health services are needing to train significantly more people to answer the call, and this is where a lot of our work comes into play. So today I'll tell you a little bit about our origin story, where we came from. We'll talk a little bit about the work that we do at ReflexAI. We'll deep dive into a couple of concepts that underpin any kind of really high stakes conversation, whether it's crisis or healthcare, mental health, and then talk a little bit about how we design what we call hyper-realistic personas in order to give people practice with conversations. So we'll get into all of this in a little bit. A little bit about me, in case you can't see me standing right in front of you. Here's a gigantic photo of me. I live in San Diego with my husband and our dog. And if you're from out of town, I'm glad the weather doesn't get much better than this. It also doesn't get much worse than this. So I'm the co-founder at ReflexAI. I'm the former CTO at the Trevor Project. I'll tell you what both of these are in a second. I've got about a decade of experience in the mental health space and about 20 years overall in technology and leadership roles. So the Trevor Project is the leading provider of suicide prevention services for LGBTQ youth. And the organization accomplishes this mission by running a 24-hour hotline that's accessible via phone, chat, and text, as well as WhatsApp. And the organization staffs this line with thousands of volunteers. So mostly volunteers work on the daytime shifts, and then they have full-time staff called crisis workers who work overnight on shifts that are very difficult to staff with volunteers. And one of the challenges is, when I joined the organization originally in around 2015, the wait times to reach our counselors was really long. It could take 45 minutes to 75 minutes. And that was really hard for young people who really needed care in that moment. And in order to become a counselor for any kind of crisis organization, there's a lot of training that goes into it, right? There's about 40 hours of total training before you're actually talking to anybody. And one of the least scalable aspects of training is giving people one-on-one role play experience. So you wouldn't get on an airplane today with a pilot who hasn't practiced emergency landings, engine failure, fire, depressurization, crosswind landings or takeoffs. You would want them to have gone through this over and over and over again, so it becomes a reflex, not something that they're troubleshooting in the air. And we believe that that is the same for any kind of high-stakes conversation, whether it's crisis or needing to get cancer treatment approved by your healthcare company. Practicing these conversations is really important. And so at Trevor, we needed to find a way of going from training about 40 counselors per quarter to 600 per month. And so the solution was, in 2019, we did some work with Google using really early generative AI, and we built something called the Crisis Contact Simulator. Now, this was built using GPT-2, so this was back when OpenAI was actually a nonprofit and built open source models. And we debuted the first persona, Riley, in 2021. The second persona, Drew, launched shortly thereafter, and they were wildly successful inside the organization. They helped us train about 3,000 counselors. And in 2021, this ended up getting a lot of press. We landed on Time's Top 100 Inventions of 2021. We got a full write-up in the MIT Technology Review, won Fast Company's Innovation by Design Award, and we started getting outreach from a lot of other organizations saying, wow, we have to train so many people, how can we do this as well? So in 2022, my co-founder Sam and I quit our jobs and we started Reflex. Sam was an executive at Trevor. He oversaw training, clinical operations, and our research teams, and I oversaw technology. And we aspired to create the flight simulator for these high-stakes conversations. And we've seen really rapid adoption, which is really exciting for us. We've deployed across more than 1,200 folks at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And earlier in the year, we won the data and AI category for Fast Company's world-changing ideas. So we're seeing a lot of need for this in the market, and we're seeing this validated across the space. So we offer 2 products at Reflex. We have ReflexAI Prepare, and these are AI-powered role-play simulations that are coupled with instantaneous feedback. And we offer these using chat or voice modalities, so you can have a conversation with one. I'll preview one of those later on in the presentation. And then we also have Assure, and this is really meant for the call center. This can ingest all of your call recordings, chats, texts, and evaluate how well the responder did using dimensions that just are not common in typical QA applications. We're looking at things like empathy, openness, topics we'll dive into in just a second, and those are pretty unique. So I want to go through 2 things that really underpin any crisis conversation, but really any human-to-human conversation. The first is empathy, and empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, or put simply, the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and attempt to feel how they're feeling. And there are 3 core concepts or types of empathy. We have validation. So when you're validating how someone's feeling, you're typically saying, makes complete sense that you're feeling that way. We have normalization. A lot of the times when people are experiencing emotions, they think that they are the only one going through this, and it's very isolating, and it's very difficult to be in the moment like that. And so a lot of the time we'll say, many people feel the same emotions, or you're not alone in feeling that way. That helps people kind of get through what they're feeling in that moment. And then reflective statements. So listening to somebody and then saying, it sounds like you're feeling disappointed, or I'm hearing that you're feeling something, and this really kind of improves active listening and really helps the person get through what they're going through. We also have open-ended questions. So a lot of the time when we speak to people, we ask a lot of closed-ended questions, and these just lead to binary outputs. And a lot of the time when people are experiencing issues, they actually kind of know what they need to do, but they haven't externalized it yet. So in crisis conversations, we actually never give people advice. We never say, I think you should maybe consider breaking up with your partner, anything like that. We really ask open-ended questions to get them to come up with their own ideas on how they can get kind of out of what they're going. So one of these might look like, are you feeling stressed? An open-ended version of this would be, what's been stressing you out lately? Are you getting enough sleep? We could rephrase this and say, how would you describe your sleep recently? Or finally, are you able to relax? And another version is, what helps you relax after a stressful day? So really encouraging people to open up a little bit more on these topics as we're talking to folks. And so I just want to give a few examples. So, and maybe how we would score these if you were doing a simulation. So I just found out I didn't get the promotion at work. I really thought this was my time, and now I'm questioning everything. So you could imagine a friend or a family member saying this to you, and you could say, oh man, that sucks. I've been there before too, and it's no fun. I've been telling you to leave that place for months. And some people might look at that and say, like, it seems like they're trying to relate to them. But there's 2 big problems with this. The first is when you say, I've been there before too, that I statement is redirecting the conversation to you, and I've been telling you to leave that place for months. That is basically saying, don't dump on me, I don't want to hear about this, and let's move on. So the person is probably just going to maybe give you a thumbs up, end the conversation there. But if we wanted to improve this a little bit, I'll give you another example, same prompt, but I bet that must feel disappointing, especially when you've been working hard for it. It's normal to question things after a setback like this. What's your next step? So great response. Why? We've layered in a few different types of empathy. You don't have to use all of these when you're responding to somebody, but the reflection is, I bet that must feel disappointing. The validation is, especially when you've been working hard for it, and you're normalizing it by saying it's normal to question things after a setback like this, asking them to open more and share more about how they're feeling. So we'll do another one. My husband texts me stuff like this all the time. Today was rough, I'm exhausted. Sometimes you really just want to write back and say, same here. Maybe not the best if you're trying to actually help them out. So I've got 2 ways that we could improve this. The first is, it sounds like you had a tough day, what happened? And really great response. If we wanted to improve this just a little bit more, we could say, it sounds like you've had a tough day, I'm here to listen. What happened, right? So really trying to get people to feel, tell you more, which helps them feel better. So I'm going to play a recording of a voice simulation that I did last week. I've sped it up a little bit, so it just takes about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and then I'll show you what a scorecard might look like when you're done with a simulation. So let's hit play here. Thank you for contacting the Lifeline. My name is John. How can I help you?
Hi, I've just been stuck lately.
Well, I'm really glad that you reached out today. While we chat, what name can I call you?
You can call me Mark.
Thanks, Mark. So tell me a little bit about what's been going on for you lately.
I left the army a few months ago and just feel lost. I miss my girlfriend too. We broke up before my last deployment. My job is just so boring. I don't know what I want from my life right now.
It's understandable to feel that way sometimes, especially, when leaving active duty. We can all feel that way. How do you usually spend your time?
I mostly just work when I see my buddy Danny or just hang out at home with my dog. Other than that, I'm just mostly bored.
Oh, it's good to hear that you've got a friend that you feel close to and also a dog. When you say bored, could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Just like I don't know what to do with myself all the time. I used to have such a structured life in the army. Now, I don't know what to do with all the time. I just feel like I don't have a direction to go in.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've got a lot going on, and a breakup, and also trying to figure out what to do with your time. I'm curious, with everything you've got going on, are you thinking of killing yourself?
No, but I don't think it would be the worst thing if I didn't wake up tomorrow.
Well, thanks for sharing that with me. It's really great. So it's a really interesting persona. Mark is a veteran who's left active service. What Mark is going through is actually really common in the veteran community. A lot of people in the military have a very structured life. Everything is prescribed. What time they get up, what they're doing for a job, where they live, what they're doing. And going out can actually be really traumatic for a lot of people. They've lost an entire support network. And so Mark is just a persona that's designed to give people experience talking to somebody like that on the line. And what this might look like, when you're done with this conversation is, we would transcribe it, and then we would assess how you did with both qualitative and quantitative dimensions, and things like your opening protocol, empathy, and of course, I'm perfect, so I gave myself all greens. But in reality, if I did this full conversation, I would have some areas of opportunity to improve, and I would probably redo the persona and maybe go down a slightly different path. So when we're teaching people to drive, we're not preparing them to drive around in an empty parking lot. That may be where they practice early on, but what we're really trying to do is teach them to drive in LA traffic, right? You might have some pissed off drivers, on-ramps, off-ramps, traffic, parallel parking. And this is really what we're trying to do in the simulations that we build, and people are really complicated. They're really complex. And so there are some key themes that we bake into all of the personas like Mark. The first is quality. The persona has to be hyper-realistic. It has to be just like you're talking to a real person and respond to you on a number of different questions, right? If you throw a curveball at it, it has to respond just like that person would on the line. And it can't just be like ChatGPT. It can't like bug out in the middle of a conversation and say something completely random. So quality is really important. Equity is really important. So there's a lot of intersectional identities of folks who are reaching out to these lines, and we have to be representative of their lived experiences and really be very nuanced in how we craft those. Operations is important. So, we are developing a technology that has to work within your technology ecosystem, and it has to be something that works really well for your trainees and your trainers. And finally, team satisfaction. We really want people to love using this and to gain a lot of experience using it. And we've been really happy since we rolled out our post-simulation surveys a few months ago. We've seen about 9 out of 10 people getting a positive experience out of it. So something that's really, really important to us. And while we started in the crisis space, we can also develop personas for a lot of different scenarios. So when you are reaching out to a crisis line, there's lots of different ages, genders, different locations across the country or around the world. In a crisis conversation in particular, we like to look at things like coping mechanisms and support, like what are some of the protective factors they have in their life. And then what are the reasons that they're reaching out? Is it financial challenges, housing issues? We have deployed our technology at ASU, and they have a student support center, and they've rolled out simulations on how to talk to people with empathy about FAFSA issues, because people have had a lot of trouble getting their financial aid approved, and that instills a lot of fear in young people who are trying to just get through their education. We've been really fortunate to deploy with quite a few partners across the country. So I mentioned the VA earlier, but we've also deployed with like First Link in North Dakota and a lot of other organizations that aren't on this list here. And some of the feedback that we've been getting is really meaningful. Of course, very realistic, but I think the one that I like the most is the simulation was appropriately reserved. Now, in a crisis conversation, if you are not using a lot of empathy, you're not using all of your skills as a counselor, you're not going to get very good responses from the person that you're talking to. So sometimes we design personas that are really difficult to get information out of. So usually towards the end of a crisis conversation, you're doing something called safety planning. You're helping them think of ways that what they'll do in that day, in that week to achieve a sustained state of de-escalation. So you'll say, do you have any friends that you've been able to talk to about what you're going through? In a reserve simulation, they'll say no. Well, when you're feeling stressed out, what's some music that you like to listen to? I don't like music, right? So we can make the personas very, very stubborn unless the counselor is using all of the skills at their disposal in order to get them to open up and work with them. So this is really great feedback for us to receive, especially the reserved part, which I really liked. And finally, I think something that's really important to us is, the right AI tools are strategic and make sense in context. We are not trying to create 50 AI products with LLMs to try to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. We are very specific on our narrow use cases and trying to really innovate and build the best products in that space as possible. And the one other thing I like to call out is we have absolutely no aspiration of replacing the person at the other end of the line, right? We believe that high stakes conversations need to happen between two people, not a person and AI. So since the beginning, since we started working on this at Trevor, we've never had any work stream that's to replace the counselor. It is always focused on how do we improve the workforce so they can provide the absolutely best support possible. All right. Oh, one more thing before I end. I just want to say that empathy is really important in marketing and data science, right? And I think that sometimes we miss out on that. I just wanted to share one anecdote, and that was I had a friend who was a volunteer for an organization for 4 years and did an hour-long shift for them every week. And towards the end of the calendar year, they started blasting them with end-of-year fundraising appeals. And the person said, in not one single email did it start with a simple sentence like, I know you've already given a lot to this organization, and we thank you for your time. We'd like to ask you to give a little bit more during this important time in our fundraising. So one single sentence to empathize with, we know you've given a lot, we're asking for something else, would have made a big difference. They ended up no longer volunteering for the organization and of course not donating in that fundraising cycle. So little bits of empathy, thinking about how do I put myself in the shoes of the person receiving this can go a really long way in every context, whether it's crisis, your personal life, as well as marketing and sales and things like that. All right, thank you.